one moment I'm standing next to this bench, and the next moment I'm lying flat on the floor, dead. My heart's not beating, not breathing. But I didn't realize that had happened. I found myself in a completely different dimension. I was floating on some sort of a raft. And I was floating not on water waves, but energetic waves that were coming towards me. And not only were they coming towards me, they were passing through me. It was welcome. It was love. It was acceptance. It was like it was enfolding me while it was passing through me. I looked up at this point, and what I saw, I can best explain as a gigantic, golden, reddish, glowing orb. I saw an infinite multitude of dimensions and universes suspended in this eternal space. I had taken the longest trip I had ever taken in 6 minutes. I finally understood that what I was looking at was the source of all creation. It was like it was asking me to merge.
These videos answer a lot of questions about why we're here, but I'm guessing you still have a few of your own. So join me for Wake Up Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Central, and 8 p.m. Eastern, where I'll answer your questions live. And I might even have a few surprise guests show up. Together, we're waking up the collective. Thank you for watching. My guest today is Philip Hasheider, who had an NDE where he saw beyond where infinity ends. He also saw that there are not one universe, but there are multiple universes. And he was also shown that we are a literal spark of the divine. So, Philip, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Laurie. Thank you for the invitation to speak with you and your viewers. Yeah, I appreciate it.
You have a very unique NDE, and you spent just 6 minutes on the other side. And I am really excited for you to share with our audience the details of some things that I've never heard any other NDE or talk about. So I'm going to let you just start, and I'll let you tell your NDE in any way that you would like to share it with us.
Well, thank you. Yes, the book 6 Minutes in Eternity is a explanation of what I experienced and how I understand it. It's more than that. It involves my family as well, because anyone who has had an NDE are not the only ones affected. There are ripple effects that go out, and it certainly did affect my wife, Mary, who's been a great support through all of it. It affected my family and it affected my friends. And so I'm sure there are going to be audience viewers who are in the same situation. And we can talk about that a little bit later, but there is more than one person involved in an NDE. I happen to be the recipient of that, but I haven't been given a free pass. I mean, I had an extraordinary experience, but I still have to live in this dimension, follow the rules that are set here. I still have to work. I still have to pay my bills. I still have to get along with people that I probably don't care to get along with. Just because I had that NDE doesn't make me anything special. I'm just another human being trying to navigate this lower dimension, but in the same way, I have a greater understanding of what else is out there. And that's the gift that was given to me. And the other gift was my return. But it was 10 months after my NDE that I was finally given the answer as to why I returned, even though I kept questioning it every day over that time. But that early October morning when I woke up, I live on a farm, and we pasture grazed beef cattle. And so every morning I would get up and I would go out to the pasture just to check on the cattle. At that point, I had the faintest idea. I couldn't have imagined that by later that day, I would become not only an expert in dying, but I would become an expert in hope and what that implies. So, as I said, I got up that morning, went out to check on our cattle because I did that every morning, and there was never problems. But I go check. Well, that morning they were all out in the grass, middle of the field, lying down. And as I got closer to them, one of them jumped up and she stared at me, perked her ears, which is a alert response from an animal, and took off running across the field. It stopped ways away, turned around and looked at me. Well, that got the attention of everyone else. And they got up, looked at me, and then took off and joined her. And they all stood there and looked. And my first thought was, it was like they had seen a ghost. I didn't understand why they had done that because every other morning that I was out there, I could walk amongst them and scratch them and talk to them, whatever. And they hardly paid me any attention. Later on, I realized something was there that they did not recognize. Something that may have frightened them. I don't know. And it could have been me. It could have been something behind me. It could have been an energetic form that they didn't understand. I can't ask them, but well, I had seen there were no problems. And so I turned around and went back to our farmyard. And that morning, coincidentally, we had arranged to have the tires on our car changed in our local village, which is 12 miles away from our farm. So I typically tossed my gym bag in because I had been working out at our local hospital's rehab and fitness center. And it's supervised. And so I drove into town and I realized I was way early for the appointment. So instead of turning right to go there, I turned left and went to the fitness area, parked the car, went downstairs, changed my clothes, came back up and said hi to the staff that were in the room, did some stretches, sat down at the arm curl bench and began doing 20 fairly modest arm curls. I stood up next to the bench when I got finished, and that's when the strangest thing happened to me. I looked down at both of my forearms because they were tingling. They were tingling like they had fallen asleep. And that's the last thing I remember until much later that evening. So one moment I'm standing next to this bench, and the next moment I'm lying flat on the floor, dead. My heart's not beating, not breathing. But I didn't realize that had happened because the moment after I looked at my forearms, I found myself in a completely different dimension. And to use human words to try to explain what I was experiencing, the closest I can approximate is that I was floating on some sort of a raft. And I was floating not on water waves, but energetic waves that were coming towards me. And not only were they coming towards me, they were passing through me. And this didn't seem strange at all. I've been asked what that felt like. If I can approximate what a spiritual feeling in a different dimension feels like in a human body, it was welcome. It was love. It was acceptance. It was like it was enfolding me while it was passing through me. It was drenching me with, I use the term liquid love. because that's what it felt like if I were going to explain a spiritual sensation for a human body. Well, I looked up at this point, and what I saw, I can best explain as a gigantic golden reddish glowing orb that filled up the whole space of eternity in front of me. This whole dimension is filled by this eminence. It was warm, and it was sending out all of these energetic waves all over. And now we think of four directions: north, south, east, and west, or forward, backward, up and down, whichever way you want to do it. It was going in all directions that we can understand as humans. Well, not only was there this glowing, there were what I refer to as little sparks shooting out from it all over the surface of this golden globe. And I didn't I don't remember thinking anything unusual about what I was seeing. So I looked, and if I were going to explain what I saw, would be looking at my hands, or a form, an energetic form of my hands that were energetic filaments stitched together so that it kind of looked like me, or I was comfortable that this was me, but they were translucent. Again, everything was passing through me. So I decided to look aside of me, off, in the distance, to see what else was there. And what I describe, or what I can describe as best as I can find the words to, is that I saw an infinite multitude of dimensions and universes suspended in this eternal space. I've tried to explain it by asking people to think of our universe, everything we consider it to be, all of the galaxies, the stars, the billions of light years across each way, and you compress that all down into what I'll say is a single sheet of paper. And then you suspend that out here in this eternal space. And then you do it with another one and set that one aside, and another one, and set that aside. And you line these up in whichever direction you want to go, vertical, horizontal, crossways. It was all of these multiple universes and dimensions. And yet each one of them had an energetic filament that reached up and attached itself to what I call a spider web-like matrix that surrounded this golden sphere. And it was at that point, or somewhere near that, that I finally understood that what I was looking at was what I'll call the source of all creation, the divine creator, the God essence. God, if you want to pick a word for it, that's what this supreme energy was. And as close as I was to it, I could still reach out and touch it and not get burned up. And it was like it was asking me to merge with it. So when I understood that there were other things around me, then I noticed that there were other sparks basically flying in, and others were leaving off this golden sphere. It, it was like an international airport, and the comings and goings, and I didn't quite comprehend what was going on, but to observe all this was I can't say that it was unusual, because it felt like I was home. Well, I do remember deciding to turn around to see what was behind me, because it'd be like going on long trip and not taking a look at the side roads to see what's there. So when I turned around to look, I saw what I can best describe as infinity. And that's because the emotion of eternity acted like a magnifying glass so that the farther I looked, the clearer everything became. That's the best way I can explain it. I don't understand how that's possible, but I understand that I was looking at that whole scene with a different set of eyes that the low wattage of my human eyes here could never see. But I was looking at that and understanding it. At that point, I did not realize that there were a dozen EMTs and hospital staff furiously working on my body, trying to revive it. If I had known that, I still couldn't have called them and tell them, don't worry, this is really good where I am. I don't really want to leave here because there's no problems here. I'm so welcomed. I'm so loved here. Why do I want to go back? But I couldn't tell them that. And yet, it was in the blink of an eye. Not even that. When I was no longer in that dimension, it was gone. And I found that at that point, with the timeline that the EMTs had given me later, that was about when they restarted my heart. I've been asked, how long did I think I had been in there, in that dimension, that eternal dimension? And my answer is, if you can feel like you're 200 or 300 years old and have passed through that amount of time, very quickly, that's what it felt like. But yet, when I saw the timeline, it was a little over 6 minutes. So as I got working with this information over the next couple of years, I realized that we can transport ourselves between time and space because I did it. And I can remember it. So I can't, I had taken the longest trip I had ever taken in 6 minutes. And I came back with an experience that took me a long time to understand and an even longer time to explain. But I have been able to understand it. And it was another, as I mentioned before, it was another 10 months before I was given the answer as to why I returned. It wasn't something that I remember asking for. And it was a gift that I did return. So the whole experience was mine. And to me, it's unique. Just as everyone else who has had an NDE, theirs is unique. There are a lot of, I think there are similarities to them. I had no idea what a near-death experience was prior to that morning. I did not read about any of them. I never studied them. So I was asked by a group of emergency room nurses who I spoke to about what I had witnessed. And one question was, well, could you think you have dreamt this? And I said, well, that's possible. But I said, I realize we all have dreams. I'm pretty sure everybody has a dream, and it's usually at night. And you may remember snippets of it, but you don't remember the full extent of it. At least I don't. But yet, everything I experienced in that dimension, I remember. And every time I think about it, it never changes. It's always the same. And that's not because it became a routine thing that I thought about. because not only is the imagery and the things I saw and experienced remain the same, the feeling I had does. Because when I think about it here, all of that warmth and emotion and love and welcome wells up within my body. So I don't know how else to explain to anyone other than that experience became embedded, imprinted on my soul, if you will, my inner essence. And that's what I brought back with me, and that's why it can stay with me. One of the earliest things I understood about this whole experience was that our bodies are more than the sum of its parts. By that, I mean, while I was standing next to that arm curl bench, I had all of the same body parts, 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 2 ears, that I had moments later lying on the floor, dead, as they referred to it, except for one thing. And that was that little spark that is the real me. And that left, and that's what went to this eternal dimension. And then when they restarted my heart, I had to leave there and come back to be able to survive. So there is a dynamic of leaving the creator energy, the God energy, as a spark and ending up here, which has taken me, it's taken me a while to understand that. But I think I have the explanation of why that cycle works. And at least it makes sense to me. And I guess when it comes down to it at the basic, I'm the only one I have to satisfy.
Right.
Because I have to live with it.
Right.
And I know I'm not I know I am not confusing myself or misbelieving myself in what I experienced, because I was also given the answer that what I experienced was true, at least for me. Now, someone else may have a completely different experience, and they may talk about it, and that's fine. I don't see why we would all have identical near-death experiences, because we're unique individuals here with unique experiences that we don't necessarily share with others.
Right.
That's just the dynamics of it, as I understand it. So why wouldn't each one be different? So when I do run into another person who's had one and listen to what they say, I have no reason not to believe it, because that is their experience. And I know there are people out there, they're skeptics, and that's fine. That's their choice. But everything comes down to choice. I had a choice that morning of turning right and going to have the car tires changed, just waiting it out there. And I had a choice to turn left to go to the hospital's fitness and rehab. Now, because I was there, I had the help. Had I gone the other direction, who knows? Maybe it wouldn't have happened. Maybe it would have happened the next day out in our pasture, which would have been to the point where we would not be having this conversation.
Right.
Because by the time anyone found me, it would have been 8 hours later, because Mary had a full-time job and she wouldn't have been back till night. She wouldn't have even known where I was, so people would have had to look for me. And where do you look in a 50, 60 acre pasture? I mean, and the grass was tall enough so that I wouldn't be standing up. I wouldn't be noticeable. So they'd have to go over and look through the whole thing. So by that time, yeah, I would have been staying definitely forever in
Right.
other
He
dimensions.
would have.
Yeah.
Philip, you're right. You are so right, because I think that these NDEs are absolutely as unique as people are. But you had a couple of experiences that I really have never heard anybody talk about. One is the way that you described the source, and the second one is the way that you described all of the other universes. So, can we start with the spark part? Because you alluded that you understand what that spark is and how that works. That cycle works, I think is what you called it.
I would be, I'm very pleased to be able to explain this as I understand it. Now, this is my understanding of it, and it might not be anybody else's. And that they're welcome to their own understanding in whatever way. But this is what makes the most sense to me. And I can understand it because uh, when you're dealing with a dimension that has infinite knowledge, I mean, infinite and supreme knowledge, and then you get down here with our puddly little brains and trying to understand something that is beyond us, uh, it can get a little confusing. But this is what I understand. It starts with the potential energy of the Creator, of God, whatever you want to refer to as the supreme knowledge, the supreme love. Um, the potential energy is floating within this God essence, this sphere. And I don't even know if it's a sphere. That's what I interpreted that mass of knowledge, love, welcome, acceptance to be. When that potential becomes the creator's thought, then that thought the creator has can become crystallized and fused into a spark, which becomes us. So, in that sense, we are and have been as eternal as God, because we are within that essence, that spirit, that sphere. We aren't outside of it. We are there, being fused and formed into that little spark. So then the spark is released. And once that spark is released, we have our separate identity. And when we leave that creator energy, that creator source, we are gifted with free will. So I'll use the term soul for this little spark because that can help us move along. So our soul becomes free will, has free will. And then we can choose. We can choose where we want to go, what we want to do, what we want to learn, because that's why we are created, is to learn lessons in whatever dimension we go. It is to recognize the divinity within every other soul. It is there to experience what God has to offer and create. Now, we think we know what God's created, but excuse me, no. We are bound by our experience here, so we tend to be limited. But when you get into that dimension and it fuses out, the possibilities are endless. So we choose to come here. I don't yet understand the process of how we choose that, but I do know we choose to come here to experience life in this lower dimension because you couldn't come here as a spiritual entity and still have the same experiences that we do, because they wouldn't have the tactile, the emotional, the whatever.
Physicality.
Sorry.
Physicality.
Yeah, being in a physical body, because the spirit would be around us. And I side point, I do believe that there are spirits here in this realm that are here to help us, not tell us what to do, but just kind of provide opportunities for us to be able to accomplish certain things.
Do you think that they're a spark also?
Probably in some way, because I think we all start that, whether we come here as an essence that's of energy, or an essence that eventually becomes physical. Now, our species, our human species, at some point, as I mentioned, I chose to come here. So to do that and experience this life, I took an off ramp on the energetic superhighway and dropped down into this lower dimension. I was born of my,
I love that explanation so much.
I was born of my parents, just like you were of yours, and anyone who's listening to this. And I was raised by them. And I've now spent almost 74 years here in this dimension experiencing. But yet I know that, this body is going to use up all its fuel, because it's not made to live here forever. It just physically can't. I don't care what people are trying to do to extend their lives. That's fine. They're not going to live forever anyway, here, physically. Yes, we live forever, but in a whole different form. So when I do expire and my body gives up, that little spark, my soul, is going to get on the on-ramp and get back on that highway and go to another dimension, have another experience somewhere else. And I'm going to keep doing that forever and ever through eternity, just as everyone else is. And the beauty of it is, we cannot stop it. We cannot prevent it from happening. Now, people say, well, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in this. I don't believe in that. Well, fine. That's your choice here. But that doesn't mean that's the truth of God, because you will continue whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
Here, physically. But once you get going, yeah, you'll be happy you left again. But it is all part of the cycle. So once we've been created as this spark, our soul, we continue on and on and on. We're going to have an infinite number of universes and dimensions to explore. We're going to have an infinite number of opportunities to learn. And maybe at some point, I don't know, but maybe at some point we will have learned everything there is to know. But then we're going to be God. We're going to go back and become that energy of God.
And that was that pull that you were feeling when you said that you felt like that God source wanted you to come back and merge with it. Do you think that you would merge and exchange the information, or do you think the information is already known because you are God?
I think the information is already known. Whether or not I was to merge, that's what the feeling was. Like, I was welcome to merge. It didn't say, well, do you want to or not? I don't remember that. Maybe that's what it was asking. Maybe I said, maybe not. Let me go back again and do something else. I don't know. It could be as simple as that. And that's not really simple, but that's the way I can explain that to me, as it applies to me. But as I mentioned, the hope of what I'm trying to explain to people is that this is not the end of our existence. Yeah, physically, yeah. We're gonna keep going on, because the inner essence of us, our soul, lives on in a different form that we're going to, we would not maybe recognize here. Although, when I talked about my imagery of my hands and understanding that it was my some energetic form of my body that I recognized. I think that's part of it because that was my spark, if you will, my soul expanding so that I could recognize myself and not be afraid. Now that again, that's my interpretation of it. Somebody else may have something else, and that's fine. But because we have all these experiences, they are embedded within us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I had them before. Do I remember them here? I don't think so. But I don't think my brain has enough capacity to comprehend all of the supreme knowledge that is available. Now,
Exactly.
now you asked a little bit before about having the answers. Well, I think all the answers to our problems are here. It just takes it just takes humanity enough effort to realize that the energy that we need to progress is here. We just have to synthesize it into something that works, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. I look at it with a little bit different verbiage. I call it waking up and remembering that you are that spark of the divine, remembering who you truly are, that you are not separate, that you are a literal God source having this experience. And as you have the experience, it helps the entire collective because it's all just different perspectives of understanding.
Yeah. Uh, my understanding is just one slice of the whole. And if you have a gazillion slices, you're still not going to be the whole thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it just shows that there is far more beyond us than we're willing to sometimes accept, sometimes recognize, uh, because it might change us, and people don't want to change
Well, and I know I
necessarily.
don't even know if it's so much it will change us, but people have attached themselves to belief systems,
Mm,
and a lot of those are rooted in religion. And the religions teach that you are outside of God, that God is something to be revered, that God will punish if you don't act in a certain way. And I think that experiences like yours are so helpful for people to understand that they are a literal slice, spark, soul, piece of the God source, and you can't take that out of you.
no, the I was asked if if I still felt there was hell. Okay, no,
Me
because
neither. I'm right there with
because
you.
and I'll explain why.
Okay.
The terminology that we use as humans, regardless of the language, is a way for us to come to some common understanding. But over millennia, it's become overlayered with many other things that become attached to it, and a lot of it has to do with greed, power, money, control. As that's my understanding. Now, when those things come into the equation, then the God essence tends to get put to the side. However, they, there are people who want to try to cloak their thoughts as being of that righteousness or whatever term you want to use. And that becomes a controlling mechanism. So you have religions who over the years, centuries, millennia, have overlayered stuff with their own ideas. We basically it's not just religion, it's our economic system, it's political system. We are all inheritors of what came before. And we think that, well, this is the way it always was. Well, that's not true. And to change things is what people don't want to do because of fear. So fear becomes another factor in all of this. But yet, all of those terms that I use, fear, greed, hatred, division, those all collect and attract those energies together in even in this dimension. But they cannot, those energies cannot lift to a higher eternal dimension because they're, what do I term I use? What I could say they're dead weight. They're too heavy, they're too dense. They cannot lift to a high spiritual level. And so they don't even exist in that upper dimension, that eternal.
Philip, that's the best explanation of why a hell can't exist on the other side that I have ever heard anybody explain with words. Number one, best. Thank you. That was a mic drop for that question.
Well, that's my understanding. Okay.
It makes complete sense. And it also resonates very deeply with what I have experienced on the other side, that there was only love. There couldn't be that existence. But I love how you said it's because that energy is too dense and heavy and it can't lift to that dimension, which was like, duh.
Yeah. So basically, think of it as that energy getting disassembled, dismembered, disintegrated. Poof, it's gone because it's not going to get up there. We do because our we carry that little spark carries, to use a human term, carries the DNA of the creator. And that is never going to get destroyed.
Yeah.
And that's why all of these other energies will not attach themselves to us as we leave. They just can't because they're not of that high energy plateau.
Okay, so then I want you to go further with this thought process, because what I'm thinking of, and I'm sure people watching are thinking about, and this comes up in the comments all the time, is what about the evil people? What about the bad people? Because I believe that they are still the spark, even if they've accumulated what we would term evil, bad, negative, low vibration. What do you think happens to those sparks?
I think they go on and join the eternal dimension. First of all, what you've just described is human verbiage, human terminology that we have through the layers of history have attached to certain acts, certain issues of what we call violence, chaos. But we're the generators of that chaos. We're the generators of that evil. We're the generators of that violence. We are, you, me, everyone else, because we simply refuse to recognize the divinity in the person next to us. That it's that simple. Okay, I'm going to ask everyone to follow me with this. If each one of us decided to drop all our biases, all our hatreds, all our greed, anything you want to take any negative energy you want to refer to. If we all drop that now, I mean, truly dropped it and just said, okay, I'm going to be more caring. I'm going to be more loving to the person next to me that I don't know, to the person I hate. If we just drop all that, we wouldn't need armies. We wouldn't need borders. We wouldn't need guns. We wouldn't need nuclear weapons. We wouldn't need any of that.
We wouldn't even need a car alarm.
No, no, because once you eliminate all of that negative energy, then we're we're not separate from anyone else. Now, some people, I can anticipate this. Some people are going to say, "Well, that's foolish. That's utopia. That's whatever." But it is true. If you stop and think about it, it is true. But do I expect it to happen tomorrow? I don't know. It might. If all of the human society on this planet decided to just change, yeah, we could do it. But it's a matter of, does
I think we're
anybody
moving
want?
towards it. I think I know that there are a lot of people who probably disagree with me. I don't watch the news. I don't follow the politics. So I definitely do not allow myself to be exposed to the narrative that is being shared that the world is terrible right now, because that's not my experience. My interactions with people are peaceful and loving and beautiful on a daily basis on the hiking trails around my town, etc. But I do think that the more of us who listen to the ideas that you're sharing, the experiences that you've had on the other side, and they start to realize that we have been exposed to ideas that no longer serve us. And when we can let go of those ideas and remember that we are the sparks of the divine, that we are these interconnected, beautiful expressions of source, and more of us wake up, then we do get closer to that utopia. And it doesn't take the entire collective for it to happen. There's a tipping point where there is a percentage of the collective that understands and embraces these ideas as truth that tips the entire collective towards that.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think the fear that we harbor is what keeps us from wanting to do all of that.
And
Fear,
what is the fear based in?
not having enough, not being good enough, not afraid of losing something, uh, which you will when you die anyway. I mean, so what's to be afraid of that? But fear feeds on itself. And the more you feed fear, the more it's going to take from you. And then you become consumed by it. And until you can let go of that and say, okay, what is it that I need to release? The fear will still be the arbiter of what you do. Now, in an odd way, the cattle were kind of like that on our farm. They were afraid of something, but yet the next morning, they were fine. Uh, or well, I shouldn't say the next morning. The first morning, I was able to go back out into the pasture, which was about a week later. They were fine. I could walk amongst them. So their initial fear dissolved, and we were back to being some partners out in the pasture. Now that others may say that's a long shot talking about cattle and humans, but yet cattle, livestock, animals, I don't care what they are, they have their own consciousness.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
so we just don't want to tune into them. Well, some people do. Some people have. But a lot of people just kind of shrug it off and go on with what they're doing during their day.
Well, Philip, I would imagine there are people who are watching who are pretty interested in more details, because the reason people write a book about their near-death experience isn't to sell and make a bunch of money. You still have your farm, you're still working. The reason they do that is because there are details that you just cannot communicate in a 1 hour conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So tell everybody about the book that you've written and where they can find it and how they can connect with you.
Okay. This is the book I've written, 6 Minutes in Eternity. And I wrote it for myself because
Oh, I love that.
I was trying to understand what happened. And I was asking questions all the time.
Makes sense.
And it was my way of working through it. Plus, also, after having been unconscious for over 6, 7 minutes, it took a while for my little gray cells to start firing again. So it was a way to work through it because I've done a lot of other writing, but it was my process of getting through it and understanding, getting something down on paper so I could, oh yeah, okay, I see that. But yet, as I mentioned early on, it was 8 months before I was given the reason why I returned. So the answer to that is also in this book, and um, it's coincidentally the picture you see behind me was
Oh,
taken.
that was my last question for you, because when you talked about the source, I wondered if that was the light of God that you were trying to recreate.
This was taken by my wife Mary uh, at our farm in the morning. So this is what we see when we get up every morning. Now the cover for this was created by a gentleman in London who did not know anything of my story that I'm aware of and had not ever seen this photo. So it's the energy of what I'm trying to explain and trying to give as hope for people is the same that comes through towards our farm in the morning and also with what this gentleman,
What a beautiful reminder you get to have on a daily basis.
well, except when it's cold. It's really, yeah. So it's been an interesting journey, but again, other people in my family had to, I don't want to say suffer, but they were affected by my great experience that I had. I mean, and so I can't, I don't feel bad about that, but I'm more empathetic towards other people because of that. Uh, Mary had a handful, but she's stuck with me. And an interesting statistic that we found at a conference a year ago was that of married couples or partners who stay together, when one has an NDE and the other doesn't, that the divorce rate is up to 80%.
Mhm.
So it's understandable to me why that is because I had this tremendous experience that I'm very grateful for. But Mary ended up with all the other crap, the insurance, having to deal with as soon as I dropped on the floor at that fitness area, everything in our lives was dropped in her lap. And so there are other people affected by an NDE. All right, you're doing great work, Laurie. I really appreciate it.
Aw.
But there's a lot of people out there who don't quite have the same look at my husband or my wife's NDE because they got the brunt of it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense to acknowledge those people. Philip, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank you for coming on to have a conversation like this with me. These feed my soul. But mostly, I want to thank you because what you are doing helps to wake up the collective consciousness, and it is so needed right now.
Well, thank you, Laurie. It's been an absolute delight for me to be here and speak with you and to your audience. And I wish everyone well, and I wish you well as well.
Thank you so much. And of course, this show is absolutely nothing without all of you who tune in to watch, to listen, to share these incredible experiences. And thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
This channel's for seekers, for hearts who remember there's something more. Subscribe to join the awakening.